March 31, 1943. The sky over central Burma belonged to the Japanese. For 2 years, the Imperial Japanese Army Air Force had ruled the air from Singapore to the gates of India. The RAF had been swept aside. The American volunteer group, the Flying Tigers, had flown their last mission and gone home. The China-Burma-India theater was a backwater, a supply line that barely kept Chiang Kai-shek's armies in the fight. And in that backwater, 13 silver B-24 Liberators of the 7th Bombardment Group, 9th Bombardment Squadron, were about to fly into hell. Their base was Pondivisawar, a dusty strip hacked out of the Bengal jungle, 120 miles northwest of Calcutta. The planes had names painted on their noses in faded white letters: Madam Libby, the Blue Goose, Old Baldy, the Pregnant Goose. The crews were a mix of kids fresh from flight school and old men, 24, 25, who had already flown 30 missions and looked 40. They wore khaki shirts soaked dark with sweat, Colt 45s on their hips, and the 1,000-yard stare of men who knew the odds. In the co-pilot's seat of the Blue Goose sat Second Lieutenant Owen J. Baggett, 22 years old, 6 feet tall, lean as a fence post, with sandy hair and the calm eyes of a West Texas boy who had spent his teenage years hunting jackrabbits across the Llano Estacado. He had been drum major of the Hardin-Simmons University Cowboy Band, class of '41, with a Wall Street job waiting when he graduated. Pearl Harbor erased that future in a single morning. Owen enlisted the next day. Flight school, twin bars, orders to India. By March 1943, he had exactly 8 combat missions in his logbook. The target that day was the railway bridge at Pinmana, 180 miles behind Japanese lines. The briefing officer had been blunt. Expect heavy fighter opposition. The 64th Sentai is based at Mingaladan. They'll be up. No one in the room needed reminding what that meant. The Nakajima Ki-43 Oscar was fast, nimble, and armed with 2 20mm cannons. Against the B-24's 50 calibers, it was usually a fair fight. Usually. Takeoff was at 06:15. The big Liberators lumbered into the sky one by one. 4 Pratt & Whitney engines roaring, dust clouds boiling behind them. By 10:30, they were over central Burma, flying in loose boxes of 3 at 12,000 feet. The jungle a green carpet far below, broken by the silver ribbon of the Sitang River. At 11:27, the first flak appeared, black puffs marching across the formation like the footsteps of an invisible giant. The bombers held course. Then the fighters came. 40 Oscars rose from Mingaladan like a swarm of hornets. They split into pairs and came in head-on, cannons flashing. The sky filled with tracer rounds, orange and red and white. The Blue Goose took the first burst in the tail. The tail gunner, Samuel L. Cruz, never had a chance. A 20mm shell detonated inside the turret and blew him across the waist compartment in pieces. The second burst walked up the left wing, punching holes through the Tokyo tanks. Fuel poured out, ignited. Fire crawled along the nacelle toward the bomb bay. Captain Paul Williams, the aircraft commander, fought the controls with everything he had. The left wing dipped. The plane yawed violently. "We're losing her. Fire in number 2. Bail out, bail out." The intercom crackled with panic and prayer. Owen snapped on his chest-pack parachute, the only kind issued in the CBI theater, and moved aft through smoke thick as cotton. The bombardier, Lieutenant Thomas Ray Lindsay, was already gone. The navigator, Lieutenant John T. Sayer, jumped next, his chute tangling in the slipstream. He fell screaming to his death. The radio operator, Sergeant William J. McBriar, cleared the bomb bay and pulled his ripcord. Owen was last. He stood in the open bomb bay, wind howling, flames licking the edges of the fuselage. For one heartbeat, he hesitated. The jumpmaster's rule, never jump into fire. Then the plane rolled left, and he was falling. Cold air slapped him at 300 miles per hour. He tumbled, limbs flailing, the jungle spinning below like a green kaleidoscope. At 1,000 feet, he yanked the ripcord. The canopy snapped open with a crack that felt like a baseball bat to the chest. For a moment, there was only silence, and the whistle of wind through the shroud lines. Then, he heard the engine. a high-pitched snarl growing louder. An Oscar, painted olive drab with red Hinamaru, was circling back. The pilot had seen the white blossoms against the sky and decided to finish the job. Strafing parachutists was not considered dishonorable in the Imperial Japanese Air Force. It was simply efficient.
The fighter rolled in from Owen's 3 o'clock, cannons winking orange. 20mm shells tore through the jungle canopy below, shredding leaves and branches into green confetti. Owen twisted in the harness, helpless. The burst missed by less than 10 feet. The Oscar banked hard left, climbing for a second pass. That was when OwenJBaggett did the impossible. He drew the M1911A1 from his shoulder holster. 7 rounds in the magazine, 1 in the chamber. The pistol weighed 2.5 pounds, was designed for 25 yards against a man-sized target standing still. He was swinging at 20 miles per hour in a 20-knot wind, 1,000 feet above the ground, with a fighter closing at nearly 300 miles per hour. He thumbed off the safety, raised the Colt one-handed, and aimed at the cockpit, a target no larger than a dinner plate moving like a bullet. Crack, 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 crack. 4 deliberate shots. The Oscar flashed past, so close Owen could see the pilot's goggles and the red scarf around his neck. The fighter banked left for a 3rd pass and never completed the turn. It flew straight for nearly a mile, then nosed over gently and dove into the teak forest. A yellow-orange fireball rose above the trees, followed by a rolling boom that echoed across the valley. Owen landed hard in bamboo, cut himself free with his survival knife, and linked up with Captain Williams and Sergeant McBriar. They evaded Japanese patrols for 8 days, eating rice stolen from villages, drinking from streams, guided finally by Kachin guerrillas to safety behind Allied lines at Fort Hertz. Back at Pont de Vessoir, the debriefing officers laughed at first. A .45 pistol from a parachute? Impossible. They demanded details, maps, timing. Owen repeated the story calmly. The laughter stopped when the wreckage was located. On April 10th, Japanese ground troops reached the crash site. The pilot, Lieutenant Hiroshi Kato of the 64th Sentai, was dead in the cockpit, a single .45 caliber bullet hole clean through the center of his forehead. The exit wound had removed the back of his skull. The Oscar had flown on autopilot for almost a mile before stalling into the trees. The bullet was recovered. It was American .45 ACP hardball. The angle of entry matched a shot fired from above and slightly behind. The kill was confirmed. OwenJBaggett became the only human being in recorded military history to shoot down an enemy aircraft with a handgun while suspended from a parachute. The citation for his Distinguished Service Cross, approved in 1944 and presented in 1945, reads in part, "For extraordinary heroism in aerial combat on 31 March 1943, Second Lieutenant Baggett, while hanging in his parachute after bailing out of his burning aircraft, engaged in attacking Japanese fighter with his .45 caliber pistol and destroyed the aircraft, thereby saving his own life and the lives of his fellow crew members. He flew 72 more combat missions, survived a second bailout over the hump when his B-25 was shot down in 1944, and returned home a captain. He worked in the oil business in Texas, raised a family, and never bragged. When asked years later how he made the shot, he smiled and said, 'I just aimed where he was going to be, and the good Lord guided my hand.'" Owen John Baggett died on July 27, 2006, at the age of 85. He's buried in the Texas State Cemetery in Austin beneath a simple stone that makes no mention of the day a 22-year-old lieutenant, hanging helpless beneath silk, turned a sidearm into history. 1 pistol, 4 bullets, 1 impossible shot that proved even the sky belongs to those who refuse to die.